It is time now for Back Pages Tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are Jonathan Liew, sports writer for The Guardian, and Charlotte Duncker, football reporter for The Times. Welcome along to you both. Happy New Year and all that. We'll hear from you shortly. Let's quickly run through the back pages as we have them this Thursday evening. So, back page of the Daily Mail covering the dramas at Everton on a day that saw Sean Dyche sacked just hours before their FA Cup third round tie with Peterborough United. They report that David Moyes is the favourite to make a return to Goodison Park. There is a sidebar story that Arsenal cannot afford Alexander Isak. It has been quite the day for managerial stories. Graham Potter back as the boss of West Ham. Jonathan himself has a piece in The Guardian to look at that appointment and says that they've got a superb coach, but a few myths need busting. We'll look at that in detail with Jonathan and with Charlotte. The back page of the Mirror has stories on both Potter and Moyes. Up in the top right, you can see news of Diallo signing a new long-term contract at Manchester United. All of those stories on the Sun's back page too. And on FA Cup third round weekend, they report that Spurs chairman Daniel Levy has been invited into opponent's Tamworth Portakabin boardroom this weekend for pie and chips. Certainly very different to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. OK, well, Charlotte and Jonathan, great to see you again. And obviously, we've got to start off with the managerial news, and particularly not just the decision to sack Sean Dyche, Charlotte, but the timing of the decision. What do you make of what's been unfolding over the last 12, 24 hours at Goodison Park?
Yeah, I think the decision to sack him wasn't a shock. I think most of us, including Sean Dyche himself, saw it coming. You heard him in his press conference the other day talking about it, and you thought he was sort of resigned to the fact. And Paul Joyce, who covers Everton for The Times, has written in his piece that sources have told him that the Friedkin group spoke to Dyche and felt like maybe he'd given up. So I think the last few days have been more about negotiating the exit in terms of how much money he'd get paid, the compensation, the rest of his contract being paid out, because obviously it was running until the end of the campaign. And I think there was a hope amongst the parties that maybe they could be in a situation where they'd stay up, he could see out his contract till the end of the season and then start this new era going into next season. But with the real threat of relegation, they've obviously felt the need to pull the trigger now and to get rid of him and to bring in someone fresh. So I think none of us are surprised that he's gone. To sack a manager 3 hours before a game is about to kick off, I don't think any of us have heard that before. The detail in the piece suggested he had been at the training ground today and picked the starting 11 for the game tonight. So he did that. He wrote in his programme notes that he was ready to face the challenges ahead. Obviously, everyone at the ground who read those programme notes knew the fate that it was swiftly delivered to him today. So, yeah, I think maybe the timing of it is a surprise, but what happened, not so much.
Listen, Jonathan, I mean, as Charlotte said, the predicament that Everton in was so stark. You know, yes, they've been there before, but Sean Dyche hadn't managed to make an impact in the last 10 games or so. So the outcome not a surprise, but how harsh did it on him that this has happened? As they are, as Peterborough already on the way to the ground.
Yeah, I don't know. I think in many ways the more disrespectful thing to do to Sean Dyche would have been to make the decision and then let him go and manage a game against Peterborough when everyone knows he's been fired. I remember Spurs doing that to Martin Jol once. Everyone in the ground knew that he was getting the sack, including him, and he still had to kind of sit through the second half of that game with everyone kind of knowing his fate. I think that's a particularly cruel thing to do. Obviously, the decision has been made. There was a bit of wrangling over money, probably over his backroom staff and things like that. But I don't think, again, you can argue with the timing or in fact the decision itself. I mean, it says volumes that we're talking about a day of drama at Goodison Park, and it basically ends as soon as Everton start playing football, the football this season. I think, quite separately from what Dyche did in the last two seasons, keeping them up, especially with that 8-point deduction, something has changed this season. I think the fire has gone out of them a little bit. I think the fire has gone out of this team. He has kind of given up the ghost, and Everton have been sort of jogging towards relegation for a while. The top scorers, I think, are McNeil, and then it's Dwight McNeil, and then Craig Dawson with 2 own goals for Wolves. That is a kind of a measure of just how badly things have gone wrong for them. They can't score goals. the morale is at rock bottom. And I think if Everton fans really sort of look at the decision and think, are their chances of staying in the Premier League better tomorrow morning than they were this morning? And I think they are.
Yeah, and ultimately, you know, the threat of relegation, as you mentioned, Charlotte, and of course, the prospect of playing their first season at Bramley Moore Dock in the Championship is something that the freaking group of the new owners of Everton would never have wanted to come up against.
Yeah, of course. This is obviously they've got new owners. They've been there a matter of weeks. I don't think it would have been the top of their to-do list to have to get rid of a manager and start again midway through a season. But I think they've looked at that, like you said, and thought they've got this brand new state-of-the-art stadium. They've got new owners in. This is a fresh start, especially at the start of next season. The next 4 or 5 months to the end of this campaign is surely just about survival. They can draw a line under this season, make sure they stay up, but that's what they have to do. They need to ensure they stay up. And quite frankly, they felt like maybe they couldn't do that with Sean Dyche, which is why they're now looking in a different direction. Maybe we'll see someone come in till the end of the season and then start again fresh next season, because going into that new stadium, it's a stadium for a Premier League team. They need to be in the top flight. And really, they didn't think they could do that with Sean Dyche managing them anymore.
With now the search for the successor underway, and I mentioned might well be quite advanced, because we know that David Moyes is the outstanding candidate right now, seems to be the favourite for the vacancy. Jonathan, what do you make of that? You know, they sometimes say never go back, but does it seem like a suitable fit for Everton given their predicament?
Well, Moyes has, I guess, two major advantages at this moment in time. First of all, that he obviously knows the club. He has a history with Everton. And the second is that he's basically available. He won't need a release clause. That they won't need to pay him to pay off a rival club for his signature. Apart from that, it's hard to see what else he really brings to the table. And I think if you look back at, you know, obviously I think Moyes is a better manager than Dyche. He has, you know, he has more varied styles and approaches. I think he may well keep them up. He might not. I mean, Sunderland obviously signed him with the intention that he would basically do a firefighting job, and that really backfired on them. I think if you go back through, you know, 10, 20 years of Everton managerial hires, they have always just been so conservative. It's almost like they've tried to pick the safe option every time. I can't think back to the last time Everton hired a manager when you thought that's a pretty brave thing for them to do. They've taken a risk there. And this goes for the well-known managers. It goes for guys like Lampard, who I think probably his celebrity gets him through the door as much as his CV. And I think if you go back through Everton managerial hires, the last guy who they actually really took a punt on was David Moyes himself, and that was probably about 23 years ago.
Charlotte, I wonder if you are an Everton fan right now, and you've got, you know, 16th place, point above the bottom three, and you've got David Moyes coming in as a manager, would you prefer to have that? Or would you prefer to have Ipswich Town, who are in the bottom three, but picking up points now and getting a little bit of momentum under Kieran McKenna, who's starting to work things out in the Premier League? I mean, they're looking over their shoulder, and Ipswich seem to be the biggest threat, really.
Yeah, and Ipswich obviously looking to strengthen. We've seen today that Jayden Philogene is likely to go there from Aston Villa. That should be confirmed tomorrow. So they're strengthening the team, like you say, playing exciting football. Kieran McKenna's got them playing the way a lot of Everton fans, I'm sure, would like to see their team playing, which has been a big bugbear of theirs this season, the way the team's been performing under Sean Dyche. But going back to the point that Jonathan just made there in terms of it not being that inspiring with David Moyes, I think maybe it's just a case of going if they take a risk, like you said, they haven't taken many risks. Fonseca is a name that's been linked. He's got no Premier League management experience. Is this the time for this ownership group to be taking a risk? I'm not too sure it is. I think maybe safe pair of hands, which is what they clearly view Moyes as. He knows the club inside out. He was there for such a long period of time. Maybe that's how they see the end of this season going, as him as a safe pair of hands, trying to keep them up and then starting afresh in the new season. Maybe they could take a risk then, maybe bring someone else in, chance to rebuild, bit of money to spend in the summer, see how the squad looks then. But I think this, Jonathan's right, does very much seem like the safe bet, but I can't see that they're going to do anything other than get with a safe pair of hands. And in this stage, it looks like it's going to be David Moyes.
And, I mean, you mentioned it before, Jonathan, this notion that there's no compensation needed. He is available, having left West Ham at the end of last season. and therefore, what they might have spent on that had they, gone for someone who's currently in post, they might end up potentially spending on a player. Might that have a greater impact, do you think? I know January's always a difficult time.
Yeah, and obviously they're still kind of pretty much on the bubble when it comes to the PSR regulations. So there isn't a huge amount of money to spend in January without outgoings. I think there is people assume that Moyes is kind of the safe pair of hands. I think Moyes is a risk. I think it is, in this day and age, it is a risk to appoint a coach who doesn't really have a defined style of play, who is a kind of a short-term stopgap, and basically neglecting the wider strategy that you're trying to put in with the new stadium and building a structure around the manager as well. I think we've seen a lot of these hires backfire in the past. You think Leeds and Sam Allardyce just a few seasons ago. So I think this is actually a time for Everton to be bold and think, this squad and these players need a little bit of a kick up the backside. They need some fresh ideas, not some guy whose claim to fame is that he managed Paul Gascoigne 22 years ago.
Okay. We'll leave it there. I think we've got plenty more to come, by the way, in terms of managerial stories with West Ham. We'll discuss Graham Potter and Julian Lopetegui and how that came to pass, and that whole handling of the situation with Charlotte and Jonathan in a couple of minutes' time. I'm going to take a quick break, but when we come back, yes, managers are the story of the day. So West Ham is our next focus, and we'll look in detail at Graham Potter's appointment. You are watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome along once again to you at home. Welcome back to Jonathan Liew, sports writer for The Guardian and football writer for The Times. Charlotte Duncker, let's talk West Ham. Premier League managerial sackings are like buses. We had West Ham yesterday and Everton today. And, of course, when it comes to the replacement for Julian Lopetegui, and we'll talk a little bit about Lopetegui and how that was handled in a moment, but Graham Potter's the man of the day in terms of the newest manager back in the Premier League. Jonathan, I'll come to you on this first because, we're having a look at The Guardian, your piece. Regular guy can put the heart back in, gormless machine. Not like you to hold back and say what you really think. Just tell us a little bit about the fit here. Does it feel more like, Potter is picking West Ham rather than West Ham are picking Potter, and he has more to offer them than they have to him?
Yeah, I think the fact that he's kind of waited so long to get back into coaching, that there have been a lot of clubs in from the past, including Premier League clubs. I think he's done his homework here, and he thinks that there is a certain amount of potential that is being squandered. And I think West Ham have basically been a vessel for squandered potential for many years. I think the main problem right now, as I write in my piece, is this is a club that doesn't really have a human heart to it anymore. There's no soul to it, and there's lots of, it's kind of a power struggle. You don't really know who runs things. People are briefing against each other. There are stories of discord in the dressing room, that Lopetegui wasn't getting on with the players, that he wasn't getting on with Tim Steidten, that Tim Steidten wasn't getting on with the wider administration. It just seems so divided and just a little bit soulless and gormless, that nobody really knows why decisions are being taken. I think fans are kind of slightly left in the dark. There isn't a human face to this organisation, and that is what Potter provides. I don't think I don't think he's like he's a Pep Guardiola level coach, but I think he's a very, very good coach who, whether it's at Ostersund's, whether it's at Swansea, whether it's at Brighton, he draws squads close together like a family. He gets everything aligned. He couldn't do it at Chelsea, obviously, because of he was very inexperienced for that size of club, and there was a lot of chaos around him. But I think he is the kind of guy that West Ham need right now. Someone to put a bit of a human face on what I think has become a bit of a soulless machine.
Do you agree with that, Charlotte? And also, what do you make of the fit with Potter at the London Stadium now?
Yeah, I think what Jonathan says is right in terms of Potter's obviously decided that this is the right challenge for him. We know that he's been offered numerous jobs in the time since he was sacked by Chelsea, and I think he's sat and reflected, and I think it took him time to get over that stint at Chelsea, because he said he was hurt by it and he had to get over the bitterness that he felt before he decided he wanted to move on. So I think he obviously feels, for his own reasons, that this is the right fit. I think everyone's expecting there to be other changes behind the scenes, maybe in the coming weeks to coming months, which may help him operate in the way that he wants to. And I think when you listen to him in his first press conference, he got all the sound bites right. He was saying exactly what the West Ham fans want to hear, saying how he wanted to bring exciting football. He was speaking about tradition of the club. He was talking about all the things that if you were a fan of that football club and you're wanting to get your club back on track, they're exactly what supporters are wanting to hear. So they've got a big FA Cup game against Aston Villa tomorrow night to kick it off. And then the supporters are going to hope that he can prove that during this time away, he's worked on himself and he's come back in a better place and can get West Ham back up the table, challenging for those European places that they obviously were under David Moyes before he left.
You mentioned in your piece, Jonathan, about this sort of myth busting about him being a perfectionist and him needing very specific circumstances and a very long time frame to get what he wants, and that actually can have a more of an immediate impact. What do you think that impact can be then?
Well, I think, if you look at what he did at Swansea, where they especially a fire sale of players when they got relegated, they could very easily have been relegated for a second time. Instead, Potter takes them close to the playoffs and then provides the foundations for what comes after. I think what he does, and this is the issue that all sort of mid-table, mid-sized clubs have, is where you're clearly a stepping stone club for the very best players. But it's getting those players to buy into your culture and your values. Say, you give me 2 or 3 really good years, and you play to the best of your potential, and I will improve you as a player, and you'll get that move. And I think he did that with players like McAllister and Caicedo at Brighton, and he can do the same with players like Paquetá and Kudus at West Ham. He can get them to buy into what they're doing, and not for say 5 or 6 years, but give him 2 good seasons, you'll get your move, and he'll rebuild again with the money. That's the sort of coach he is, and I think he can do a really good job, because there has been so much wasted money and wasted potential at West Ham. So it makes sense from a business point of view as well.
Just in terms of what he can achieve, I just want to make a link back, Jonathan. I'll come back to you on this, on what you said about David Moyes. On the first point, you said that he's a better coach than Sean Dyche with more variation. But then you said that he was a risk and, didn't really have much else to sort of bring to the table. And you mentioned about, coaching Gaza, more than 2 decades ago or whatever. But he did win a Conference League. Does Potter have to do something akin to that, at least go deep and get back to European competition and go deep? Because otherwise, the stats suggest that, we should still have David Moyes at the London Stadium after all of this.
Well, I don't think you'll find any West Ham fan arguing that they want David Moyes back. I mean, yes, the Conference League win was incredible. It was an incredible moment. It was an incredible memory. I think the point I was trying to make is that Everton really need fresh ideas. They need a coach, a young coach, at the top of their game, not someone trying to cling on, which feels like a lot of the appointments that they've made. And West Ham are the same. Potter is still a coach who I think, by his own admission, would have a lot of improving to do. And I think if he gets them challenging for top 6, top 7 within a couple of years, I think you can say, even if he he doesn't win a European trophy, you can say he's probably done a decent job there.
Charlotte, what do you think a reasonable trajectory of success looks like for Graham Potter at West Ham?
I think if you look at it this season, it's going to have to be a top half finish, isn't it? Like with clubs that are fighting at the bottom of the table, any sort of cup run is going to give them confidence. But I think, given where David Moyes got them, I think the expectation of the supporters there has risen now. So I think over the next year or so, the expectation is going to be that they're pushing to at least get back into the Conference League, if not the Europa League, and push further up the table, because that's what these supporters have experienced in the recent past. They're looking at that squad. They've got this new fresh manager in. Why shouldn't he be having the same aspirations to push up and recreate that again? So I think going forward, that's going to have to be the long-term aim, to get back into Europe.
Is there a tie, an FA Cup tie at Aston Villa for Graham Potter to start off with, and then 5 of the next 6 games are London derbies, including a return to Chelsea. Will be interesting for sure. OK, let's turn our attention to Amad Diallo. Jonathan, I mean, it's been a tricky old start for Ruben Amorim, but Amad Diallo pledging his future to the club, signing a new contract. I mean, he has been the shining light, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I think we've heard a lot about Manchester United departures in recent weeks, certainly with the window opening. Diallo is one of those players, it actually started on Ruud van Nistelrooy, actually, and then he's become a real mainstay under Amorim, you actually look at the minutes he's getting. He's not subbing him off in the 60th or 70th minute. He's giving him 90 minutes. That's how much he relies on him. And he does, in a time of great flux for United, he does feel like one of those players who's kind of untouchable at the moment.
How key do you think he's going to be for United going forward, Charlotte?
Yeah, well, if you look at the way they've been attacking this season, they're not scoring enough goals. He's one of the brightest sparks going forward. So if he can be the bright spark in a team that's struggling, how can he do if the rest of the team up their level and he gets some better players around him? So there was a reason why they signed him 4 years ago for his potential. He's starting to show that now. He had a couple of long-term injuries, which kept him out at the beginning, but that loan move really helped him out. So yeah, he's been flying, and there's no reason why he can't be really important for them going forward.
Let's just quickly turn to the back page of the Mail and a story by Craig Hope, excuse from it. Arsenal cannot afford record fee for Alexander Isak, and that actually the focus is more on outgoings. Gabriel Jesus, Alexander Zinchenko. What do you make of this situation? Because it does appear to be the final piece of the jigsaw for Arsenal if they can find that out-and-out goal scorer, Jonathan. And Isak has been sort of in the frame for a while.
Yeah, I mean, no secret that Arsenal are looking for a striker. Isak, probably best in Europe at the moment. If Newcastle don't qualify for the Champions League, I think Arsenal have a much stronger bargaining hand. If Newcastle are in the Champions League, I don't see them selling. And it would take, I think, a monumental fee. Feels a bit like a bargaining chip, this one. Feels like, the start of a saga where you put these kind of stories out in an attempt to try and get an opening fee that is more in your ball court. But I might be wrong about that.
Charlotte, really briefly on Isak. I mean, do you feel the move could happen if Newcastle are not in Europe and Arsenal do just decide to, for once, really push the boat out?
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely one for the summer. I can't see anyone spending over 100 million on a striker in January. Why on earth would Newcastle want to sell him as well to a rival at this stage of the season? So maybe one for us to look forward to in the summer.
Fantastic. We're going to leave it there. Jonathan and Charlotte, thanks so much for your company this evening. A big FA Cup third round weekend, of course, to look forward to with Tamworth versus Tottenham and also Dagenham and Redbridge, the other non-league club involved, and some big ties. So I'm sure you'll enjoy that. But thanks so much again for all your insights this evening. We'll see you again very, very soon. By the way, if you missed any of the show, do not worry. There's another chance to see Back Pages tonight, hour. The show also available, of course, as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Join us again Friday night. Our guests will be Mark Ogden of ESPN and The Mirror's John Cross.